I'm going to be showing you how to build this miniature kitchen cabinet with a real wooden butcher block countertop. And I'm going to be building it using a piece of scrap 2x4. Today I'm going to be showing you how to build a miniature butcher block countertop made from real wood. I'll put a link in the description to the playlist so that you can build your own kitchen cabinet for your miniature projects and dollhouses. I'll show you how to build this 1/12 scale kitchen cabinet from start to finish. I painted the cupboard using some cheap acrylic paint that I got at the dollar store. Some people use Mod Podge to paint their wooden miniature furniture, but I'm going to be using some spray lacquer. I'm using a satin finish, so it won't be really shiny like the Mod Podge finish. You can get spray lacquer in a satin finish like I'm using, or a shiny finish for a Mod Podge look, or you can even get a flat finish. I like the satin finish as it gives a finish similar to that of real painted furniture. This will also improve the texture of the miniature, giving it a smoother feeling surface rather than the rougher texture of the acrylic paint. I left the lacquered cabinet to dry. It takes about half an hour. I'm going to start building the butcher block countertop now. I'm building it using some wooden tomato garden stakes that I purchased at the dollar store. Notice the grain in the garden stakes. Look for interesting pieces of wood with knots and different colors when you're looking for wood to use in your miniature butcher block countertops. This will provide some interest to the butcher block countertop, making it look more authentic. I used my bandsaw to trim the pointed ends off of the ends of the garden stakes. Hey, if you're enjoying my video, please hit the like button and maybe even subscribe to my channel, or leave me a comment. As a small YouTube channel, it really helps me out. And if you've already subscribed to my channel, well, I just wanted to tell you, I think you're awesome. I measured the garden stakes and they're approximately ½ an inch wide, or about 0.75 inches. Using a 1/12 scale, that's equivalent to being approximately 6 inches if this were the real thing. I did a video explaining how these miniature scales work if you're not sure how I came up with 6 inches. I'll pop a link in the description for you if you want to check it out after. It's a bit wider in width than we would normally like. I need to cut the garden stakes in half, lengthwise. I set up a ripping fence on my bandsaw. I carefully cut the garden stakes in half using my bandsaw. The length of my cabinet is 4 inches. I'm going to cut the miniature pieces of lumber to 5 inches long to allow for an overhang on each end of the cabinet. I examined the different pieces of wood, looking at the interesting wood grains, knot holes, and different shades of wood. These unique features in the wood will make your butcher block countertops look really interesting and authentic. I measured the pieces of wood 5 inches long, making sure to cut the wood in such a manner that I included these interesting characteristics of the wood grain. Again, using my bandsaw, I cut the wood to length. I brought the wooden pieces back to my workbench and laid them out in a manner that was interesting and appealing to the eye, making sure that the different colors of wood and knot holes would be in prominent locations on the miniature countertop. It's a good idea to lay the wood out in the precise order you want them on your countertop. It makes it easier when you start gluing the pieces together. Using some wood glue, I glued the wooden pieces together. Using a small stick as a glue applicator, I made sure that the sides of each piece of wood was thoroughly covered with wood glue. You want to be careful not to use excessive glue, but you also need to be sure that every part of the surface is covered as well. Avoid having excess glue coming out from between the joints. Using my square, I made sure that the bottom end of the countertop was lined up at a right angle. I want to make sure that everything is nice and straight so my countertop won't be too small. I placed the wooden pieces on some parchment paper so they wouldn't stick to my work surface, and I used some bar clamps to hold the wooden pieces together while the glue dried. Gently tighten the clamps, and remember, if you tighten the bar clamps too tight, your wooden countertop will bow, which will require you to do extra sanding when the glue dries. If you have the clamps too loose, they won't glue properly and you won't get nice tight joints. You need to take care when you're doing this process. While I was waiting for the countertop to dry, I started working on the drawer and door handles for the cabinets. I'm going to be painting them gold with some acrylic paint I got at the dollar store. I'm using some small pins with round heads for these handles. I used a piece of cardboard to stick the pins into. The cardboard will hold the pins while I paint the small pieces. The following day, I removed the miniature butcher block countertop from the clamps. I'm using my sander to smooth the countertop. When you're making butcher block countertops, you never get them exactly flat when you clamp them up and when you're gluing them together. There's usually a fair amount of sanding to do. If you don't have an electric sander, you could always use a file to get the wood flat and then use some sandpaper to smoothen out the wood. You can see here in the picture that the countertop has a bit of a bow to it. I need to smooth out this surface. This is to be expected when you're working with such small pieces of wood. After I got the countertop flat, I took it back and laid it on top of the cupboard. You can see here it's starting to take shape. Notice the grain and the different shades of color in the wood. This will look really good when the countertop is stained because the stain will really bring out and enhance the grain. I put the countertop in place on the cupboard and flipped it upside down. Using a pencil, I traced the cupboard onto the countertop. This will tell me how much of the countertop I need to trim off. Remember, you need to leave a little bit of an overhang on the sides and on the front of the cupboard. I shaded in these areas that I'm going to be cutting off. You don't want to make a mistake and cut off the wrong part and make your countertop too small. Shading in the scrap areas of the wood will help me not to make a mistake when I'm cutting the wood. Using my bandsaw, I trimmed the butcher block countertop down to size. Here you can see the countertop has been cut down to size, and the kitchen cupboard is looking much better now. I used a belt sander to put the final finishings on the countertop. Using the sander, I removed any of the saw marks caused by the bandsaw on the length portion of the butcher block countertop, and I carefully sanded the ends of the butcher block. This will really make the end grain of the countertop look good. Here you can see the grain at the end of the wood. You can see the countertop is the right size for the cupboard now, and I sanded the ends of the countertop as well. I used some clear stain that I used in my backyard fence to stain the miniature butcher block counter. After giving the wood stain a mix, I started to stain the countertop. Here you can see the stain is really starting to bring out the wood grain, the knot holes, and the different color variations of the wood. I laid the countertop on the project to see how it would look. Initially, I was quite concerned about the bright yellow color, but it actually looks pretty good with the stained countertops. Once the stain on my countertop and the paint on the door handles and drawer handles had dried, I used some clear satin finish lacquer to coat these items. I let everything dry thoroughly. The next day, I installed the drawer handles and door handles in the miniature cabinet. I have a miniature hand drill and some teeny tiny drill bits. I need to drill a small hole where the door handles will fit. I used a pin to create marks where I wanted the drawer handles and door handles to be on the cabinet. These will act as pilot holes when I use my drill to drill into the wooden cabinet so that I can install the door handles. Here you can see the pinpricks that I made to make sure that I get the handles in the exact spot I want. Using my little hand drill, I drilled into the wood about 1/4 of an inch. I put the pins in to see how far down they would go in the hole. I used a pair of side cutters to trim the pins to the proper length. Initially, I bought these cheap side cutters from the dollar store. I don't recommend that. They simply were not sharp enough to cut the pins. It's always a better idea to buy better tools if you can afford it. Fortunately, I had a pair of side cutters which are much better quality and they easily cut the pin to length. You'll see here that I'm using my fingers to judge the depth of the hole. I need to cut the pin to that length. Always make sure when you're cutting the pin to hold the end of the pin with the round bulb on it. This is the end that you're going to be using as the handle for your finished project, because when you cut the pin, the other part of the pin is going to go flying away. This is the end of the pin you're going to be using as the handle for your finished project, because when you cut the pin, the other part tends to go flying away. I put a little bit of glue on the door handle and stuck it in the hole. Using a wet Q-tip, I carefully removed the excess glue from around the miniature door handle to the cupboard. I'm putting on the second door handle now. Don't use too much glue on the end of the pin, just enough so it stays in the hole and it doesn't come out and come loose. When you're cutting the pin, be really careful because the excess piece tends to fly off and you don't know where the little bits of pin are and you don't want them kicking around in your workshop. Once I had the door handles attached, it was time to glue the butcher block countertop on top of the cabinet. I applied the glue on the top of the cabinet. Using a small piece of wood, I spread the glue on the top of the cabinet like a nice smooth layer of butter on a piece of bread. Here you can see the beautiful wood grain of the countertop. I carefully positioned the butcher block countertop in place on top of the cabinet and let the glue dry. And there you have it, the kitchen cabinets in the pantry of the miniature 1/12 scale Sears Craftsman Kit House model that I'm building. And there's the link to the playlist I told you about. Check it out and see how I transformed an old chunk of 2x4 into this beautiful miniature kitchen cabinet. We'll see you in the next video.